We were headed to the East Coast with a theme of Civil War and civil rights and a plan to visit many museums. Our first stop was the Cosmosphere in Hutchinson, Kansas, which told the story of the U.S.-Russian space race. Both countries started with the German rockets and scientists. Russia had the first satellite, Sputnik 1, the first object to hit the moon, and the first man in space. Yuri Gagarin had a spherical capsule and actually ejected from the capsule to land via parachute. Discovery Park in Union City, Tennessee is designed to be a little of everything museum. They have dinosaur models, but also a real Russian mammoth skeleton, Tennessee history from Indians to Daniel Boone, military history, and technology from trains to modern lighting and energy storage. In Nashville, we visited the Country Music Hall of Fame. The highlight was a 20-minute video of country music on TV. Outside Nashville is the Stone River battlefield from the Civil War. This was a central hub for railroad lines. The Confederates surprised the Union troops at breakfast, but the Hazen Brigade held their position through 3 attacks, allowing the other Union troops time to retreat. Next day, the Confederates attacked again, but were slaughtered by the Union cannon on the hill above. That night, we attended the Grand Ole Opry.
Swing that chair, stop it, let me ride. Swing that chair, stop it, let me ride. Rock me, Lord, got that easy. I've got home on the other side. Swing that, swing that, swing that, swing that, swing that, that chair went from down. He's not so taking us back to the he just wanna lay down his head low. Swing that chair, stop it, let me ride. Swing that chair, stop it, let me ride. Rock me, Lord, down that easy. I've got a home on the other side. Swing that chair, stop it, let me ride. Swing that chair, stop it, let me ride. Rock me, Lord, come it easy. I've got a home on the other side.
On to Smoky Mountain National Park. Cades Cove, where we camped, was first settled in the 1830s and has a collection of structures built from 1870 to 1915. Next day, we took the park road to Clingman Dome, the highest point in the park. We had a fun day in Dollywood. We listened to music almost the entire day, except for a train ride up the mountain and one roller coaster, among the 7 or 8 they have.
Tall and handsome surfer one made my heart come all undone. Do you love me? Do you surfer dude, my handsome surfer dude? I'm not reaching up, it's all aboard.
Greensboro, North Carolina, we visited the International Civil Rights Museum, which is housed in the Woolworth store, where 4 A&T students started a sit-in on February 1st, 1960, to protest the fact that the lunch counter was white only. Pamplin Historical Park features the National Museum of the Civil War Soldier, which tells the story of camp life for both Confederate and Union soldiers, with numerous artifacts. The park is on the grounds of the breakthrough battle of the Civil War, when Grant finally broke through the Confederate lines of Lee's army on April 2nd, 1865. Outside, there were exhibits on plantation life at the Tudor Hall Plantation for both whites and their slaves, and they also recreated the defense works that were put up to defend Richmond during the Battle of Petersburg. In Newport News, Virginia, we spent 3 hours at the Monitor Center, built to hold the turret of the USS Monitor after it was raised from its watery grave. This was the first gun turret ever built. The museum tells the story of both the Monitor and the Merrimack, how they were built, their strength, weaknesses, and their famous Civil War battle. We spent 3 hours at the American Indian Museum in Washington, D.C. It started at the Our Universe exhibit, which depicts the cultural stories of 8 different American tribes. The next major exhibit was about the treaties between the U.S. government and the American Indian tribes and how the treaties were always broken. Then an exhibit on Indian legends and artwork. We've been to the American History Museum numerous times and did repeat our 2 favorite sections, the American Presidency and the First Ladies. The most interesting exhibit was Many Voices, One Nation, reminding us of how America has incorporated people from many places over time. While wandering the museum, we encountered surprises like this automation of a fryer from the mid-1500s. The Museum of African American History begins with the slave trade. Slaves were used as laborers throughout the New World, primarily to grow rice, tobacco, and sugarcane. Cotton did not become much of a crop until the invention of the cotton gin. Stories of key black figures are told, as well as common black soldiers serving in the Civil War. The history continued with exhibits on the Jim Crow laws, as well as the Civil Rights Movement. Interestingly, after the 60s Civil Rights Movement, blacks started to appear in TV and movies. The election of Obama is the current end of the history story.
This country, race determined where you lived, who you married, what side of the cafeteria you sat on, who you were going to, live with. It had everything to do with everything.
You know, I was raised in the South, and I think being raised in the South, those of us from the region tend to have an understanding at an early age that race is a real issue. Doesn't mean that we, particularly if we're white, agree on what that issue means, but anyone raised in the South knows that it is the background noise of our history.
In this contemporary moment, because you can have a Barack Obama as president, because you can have Oprah Winfrey as a multi-millionaire, is she a billionaire? Like a black woman with a whole lot of money. The fact that you can have that in 2015, I have my students who will say, well, we've come so far. Like, why do we even have to talk about all this stuff? It's not like that anymore.
If you think nothing's changed in the past 50 years, ask somebody who lived through the Selma or Chicago or Los Angeles of the 1950s. Of course, a more common mistake is to suggest that Ferguson is an isolated incident, that racism is banished, that the work that drew men and women to Selma is now complete.
At Fort McHenry, outside Baltimore, we listened to the ranger explain the Battle of the Chesapeake during the War of 1812, using cones to represent ships and troops. The British had to get past Fort McHenry to take Baltimore. At 7 a.m. on September 13, 1814, the British bombardment of the fort began. Scott Francis Key watched the rockets' red glare, the bombs bursting in air, all day and night. The next morning, he searched to see which flag was flying above the fort and saw the Stars and Stripes still flying. Outside Wilmington, Delaware, is the Hagley Museum, the original home of E.I. DuPont. Down the hill, he built his factory in 1802 using the Brandywine River to power the mixing of gunpowder. It was fascinating to see so much of the original equipment still there, especially the two 8-ton wheels that were used for mixing the powder. In Philadelphia, we visited Independence Hall, where both the Declaration of Independence and the Constitution were debated. Next door is Congress Hall, where Congress was held from 1790 to 1800. We had visited the Franklin Institute when our girls were young. It was one of the first museums to have interactive exhibits. It still is a fascinating place to bring children. Exhibits on animal heart rates, artificial lighting, the mechanics of machines, how things fly, or how we read body language. Unfriendly? Friendly. Happy? Sad? Nervous? Relaxed? The National Museum of Civil War Medicine in Western Maryland was a small, old museum, but it emphasized the medical innovations of the Civil War: anesthesia, ambulances, field hospitals, and surgery. Harpers Ferry, West Virginia has a lot of history. George Washington established a munitions factory here because of the availability of water power. In 1859, John Brown led a raid in an effort to free the slaves here. The Union troops torched the armory to avoid capture by the Confederates during the Civil War. On the way home, we stopped at the Cincinnati Zoo, rated as one of the best in the country. There were exhibits of nocturnal animals like the black-footed cat, unique animals like the sifika, and an insect world with the giant dead leaf mantis and the Florida orb web spider. We went to the Illinois Holocaust Museum in Skokie, Illinois. Exhibits displayed how many Jews were killed compared to the pre-World War II population, and the small size of the Warsaw Ghetto, where 9 people were living in each room. But the highlight was asking questions to a hologram of a Holocaust survivor, in our case, Pinchas Guter, who survived the Warsaw Ghetto and 3 concentration camps. We ended the trip by spending a long weekend with Laura, our daughter, Greg, our son-in-law, and our 2 granddaughters, Mallory and Claire.